Good afternoon, everyone. It's June 5th, 2019. I have Jenny and Joel is also on with us. We're going to be talking about some end of year cleanup, end of year things you want to do and aware to get ready for next year and make sure everything's ready to go when next year gets here. I assume that most everybody, at least that's on the webinar, your students at your district are probably gone. I do know there are some districts out there that still have work days going on this week. One of my local districts here is not through until Thursday, I think. But hopefully, the kids are all gone and we get time to actually do some work. And so let's get into the work that needs to be done for Aware for the summer. If you've been customers of ours for several years, as I know from looking at the attendees, a lot of you have. There's not really anything different here, just definitely a reminder of what we want you to do. So I'm Jason, and Jenny's going to do part of the presentation as well today. And like I said, we have Joel on. It's going to be in the background, maybe answering some questions and also causing havoc like Joel tends to do. All right, so we're going to talk about these things. We're actually going to just switch over into a live site to do them, to kind of show you how to do them and remind you how to do them, because a lot of these things we only do once a year. And although you might have been customers a long time, only doing it once a year, sometimes we forget to do it or forget why we're doing it or how to do it. And so we definitely want to remind you. So we're just going to start from the top at talking about the calendar. And if you were in attendance of the other end of year one, I might have had some thoughts about there too. We're specifically going to talk about Aware things today. As always, if you do have questions, you're welcome to put them in the questions box. We'll try to answer them there. Try to keep them on topic if possible. And at the end of when we get through here, if you have any generalized questions or whatever, if we can answer them, we will. But we're going to try to keep this on topic because that way the recording is on topic for when we post it, so that people know what to get when they watch it. All right, let me get out of here and just move over into a site, and I probably ought to zoom that in. Okay, so getting ready for next year. A lot of your district might look like my fake district here and have a whole bunch of years of calendars. And so speaking about Aware, there's really two things that apply here concerning calendars. Most importantly, during the summer, you'll definitely probably going to have some people that are going to be trying to build assessments, getting ready for next year, maybe unit assessments or benchmarks or whatever, if they're going in and trying to build assessments ahead of time. You cannot build an assessment in Aware unless you have an instructional calendar. And so you definitely just want to create a new calendar. And we're going to be a new year, obviously. And then you just pick your first day of school. And for some of you, that's going to be somewhere in this range. I'm just going to pick one. And then you'll pick the last day of school. And the instructional calendar, especially if you're using Forethought or a couple of the other products, you definitely want the instructional calendar to match your start date and end date. We'll talk about the reporting calendar in a minute, which doesn't have to, but and then just pick if you have semesters or trimesters or whatever. And then you begin editing the instructional calendar, and it brings up the calendar here. Now, the only real requirement is that there be a calendar and that the calendar has a start date and end date. That's all you have to have in order to use most of our applications. If you are using other products like Forethought, then you might want to go ahead and go in, and if September 2nd, Labor Day, you're not going to be in school, then you want to change that day to a holiday. You're welcome to do that. I'm not going to go through that process because it's not necessary for Aware. But what is necessary for Aware is to have the start and end date, which you did during the wizard, and to also have a edited reporting calendar. So reporting calendars, you can have one or two or three or four. A reporting calendar, essentially, from an Aware standpoint, denotes what we call when do the terms occur. And so a term for most people is a semester or could be a trimester. And so this deals with your roster import from your student information system. And so when do you want your rosters to update to the next term? If you've been customers for many years, in the past, this was critically important for the start and end date, especially the end date, because after a certain date, like in this case, if it was June 3rd, let's say that was day before yesterday, June 3rd, which that is. Then there's the 21. So let's say if it was June 3rd, day before yesterday, in the past, up until about 2 years ago, teachers would no longer be able to see their roster students for the past year because they were no longer in an active term. And so a lot of times we would advise you to extend that end date past your real end date of school and go out to like the end of June or something like that. And you absolutely can still do that if you're used to doing that. Nothing wrong with that. Let's say we're going to roll up to the next year in our student management system in July, and we want to make the end date for the reporting calendar June 30th so that that roster stays active. That's the way you had to do it in the past, but our development team changed a couple of things about a year and a half ago to where if there's no replacement roster being sent in, it just freezes the roster as it is at the end. And so this is not absolutely necessary to extend this date anymore like it used to be, but you can definitely still do it. I will mention that if you are using Aware for summer school and you have summer school rosters coming in, then that would be a replacement roster. And so for the teachers that teach summer school, or then those are going to be over. The new rosters are going to be showing up because there's a roster that's being sent. To for that teacher to be the teacher of record. Anyway, but so the reporting calendar, once again, let me just reiterate what the purpose here is, to really just denote start and end of each term, which in this case I did semesters. So the start of the first term, I might go back and say, I want to start this on August 7th. Because we're going to do our roll up and our student management system to the next year. Registration's already done. We've got courses and sections and stuff in there. We're going to be doing training for a couple of weeks with teachers prior to school starting, and so we want them to be able to go in and look at the data for students that they're going to have. And so if the schedules are already built and your student management system is doing the export process, then our roster importer will be importing those rosters. Whenever this date comes into play, that's when the new rosters will turn over and Aware. And so this date does not have to match your instructional calendar. If you'll remember, my instructional calendar was the first day of school, which was, I think, I set for August 26th. But you can make this any date you want. It doesn't change anything other than Aware. Some districts choose to do more than one reporting calendar. They'll do, for example, they may do an elementary reporting calendar and then a secondary reporting calendar, because the secondary schools a lot of times are set up, their schedules are done in the spring because scheduling has to be done early. And so we want to turn on the roster updates for secondary early in August because they're ready. Whereas sometimes in the elementary, we don't have rosters built in the student information system until the day before school starts, or even the day of school, or the first week. And so elementaries, we may make this the first day of school, whereas secondary, you make, whenever you want to, earlier in August or even in July if you wanted to. And if you do multiple reporting calendars, you go to manage schools and then you pick on a school and then you tie which reporting calendar goes to that school type. And so if you had multiple ones and you wanted to put all your elementaries on the elementary reporting calendar, then you would do that, associate that in the managed schools and do the other ones for the other campuses. So you can have as many reporting calendars as you need. Got to have at least one. If you only have one, you don't have to do this association. It'll associate it for you. If you do have more than one, then you would want to go make sure that the one you want is tied to the schools that you want. If you have any specific questions about reporting calendars or instructional calendars, or you're just wondering, what are the impacts or whatever, please just contact us individually. You can contact our support team. You can contact our training team. Everybody does things differently. Obviously, this vastly involves the student management system, whether you have eSchool, Skyward, Texas, whatever, all those are out there that you guys are using. Then we can help you. Each of you are going to have a kind of a different question and a different answer. And so if you would just email support@eduphoria.net with those questions, or if you want to come straight to the training team, it's training@eduphoria.net. and that's the case for the rest of the webinar as well. So I know there's a couple of questions that have already come in that are specific, and so we'll try to, if you'll just hang on, we'll try to answer those specifically typed back to you. But if you don't get the answer that you want, or you need a conversation about it or whatever, then you can always email our team. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move into Aware and talk about archiving tests. And those of you, once again, that have been around for several years, we still are so blessed to have the mass test editor now. In the past, you had to archive assessments one at a time, but now we have the mass editor. So I'm going to go ahead and go into the mass edit assessments. And when you get in here, it shows nothing until you start searching for something. And so the best way to start narrowing things down, especially if you're a district that's been using Aware for many years, is not necessarily by test type, because if you type in district benchmarks or whatever your test type is, if you've been using Aware for multiple years, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands, of tests to start weeding from. You can use test state. So my recommendation is to use this test state of start with active. And so if you'll just search for active, then it's going to show you all the tests that are either campus or district tests that are in the current active state for your district. And once again, it is a best practice, and we absolutely recommend strongly that all tests be archived at the end of the year. And so all these active tests, that I have 231, need to be archived before the next school year, because if they're not archived and they're just left active, someone could give that test again next year. All they would have to do is extend the end date, and then the data from last year would be mixed with the data from next year. And so that's not good. You can always, and you might say, well, I want to use that test again. Well, the best practice there would be to create a new test and copy the existing test. So because you can always copy archive tests as well. So how this works, when you get to a list of tests, there is a limit on how many can be, an action can be taken through the mass test editor. And it kind of fluctuates depending on the size of test and so on. But I would say you're always pretty safe to say if you have less than 120-ish tests, you might just do it by 100 to be really safe.
138.
138. Well, it's it fluctuates from 121 to 135 but okay. If you try to do something, so like if I click on the checkbox and go and try to archive, and you do it and it actually flashes, but all the tests are still here and they say active, you had too many. And so to be safe, 120, 130 or less. And so if you have more than that amount, which is what I do here, you can always then go by grade, go by subject, and whatever. I'm actually going to go into grade 2 because I had something planned already, and I only have 16 tests. And so let's say all these tests are active, and they're for second grade. I want to archive them, and so I'm going to click this little checkbox to select all. I'm going to go into my advanced tab, and I'm going to say archive all these 16 tests right now. And I did it on purpose. I got an oops, and the oops is going to tell you that you cannot archive a test if the test has an end date past today's date. And I went in there and I'd actually made one, the first one, just as an example, to say, today's June 5th of 2019, and so this end date is June 12th of 2019. It will not let you archive a test that has an end date past the current date that you're on today. And so you would want to modify the end date, and you can just do it just like that. You'll notice that it's now yesterday, so you could do it right here without having to go back to the test. You can still use the mass editor to make that change. Now you can go back in and archive. And are you sure you want to do it? Because there's no easy way to undo this. Yes, archiving is not bad. Archiving is good. It's just locking down all the data so that we don't get data mixture. And so I'm going to yes archive, and you'll notice those tests disappeared because there's no longer any active grade 2 tests. So I could just take away grade 2. It's now researching for the other active tests. And if you'll remember, I had 231. I lost 16 of them, so now I have 215. I could continue that process. All right, so I know we have, we just have We have a question that says, who can unarchive a test? Anybody that has access to create the test can also change the test state, which is pending, active, or archive. And want to go ahead and I do want to mention that you can do pending as well. Now, if you're going to go ahead and archive pending, because sometimes, like Jenny and I say, and you can see some of them here, sometimes there's tests that are pending that are just play around tests. People are doing them from training or whatever, and this is a demo site. So we have a lot of them that we play around with, and so you definitely could go ahead and archive pending ones. I would say that if you are going to do pending, you want to go ahead and do that as early as possible, because you don't want to be archiving any pending tests that are created for next year. But once again, assuming that they were created for next year, their end date should be past today's date. And so if that was the case, then you would know not to archive those. And so you could just uncheck those. So you could select all and then uncheck the ones, that had that you could see that the end date was passed. So you would only be archiving the ones that were probably stuff that are not going to be used. Anyway, but so you might want to go ahead and clean up your pending tests as well, especially if you have a lot of them. It's always good to keep your list of tests in the expansion list as short as possible, just for everybody that's involved. If you don't have any experience with using the mass test editor, or you run into problems, just like I said earlier, definitely contact our support team, support@eduphoria.net, or you can always contact our training team as well. The test editor is pretty intuitive, but there are some things that you can get caught up on if you hadn't done some experience with it. We'd be glad to help guide you to get you in the right spot, get you prepared for next year. Any specific questions on the mass editor?
Just the user roles.
So to be able to use the mass test editor, you have to be a district data administrator to be able to have the test mass editor.
Now, to answer though, if someone created a test that was in the active state or in the archived state, they could move it back to active.
That's correct.
Their campus admin, they just couldn't do it in the mass test editor.
They just couldn't do it in the mass test editor. That's correct. So anybody that has access, so if anybody that's either a district or campus administrator, so you can either build district assessments or school assessments, there's going to be an archived list, which could be from years past. Any of those tests, they theoretically could go to open and then switch the state back from archive to active again. Now, if you were to do that, then they've got to regenerate answer documents. I mean, there's other things that have to go into play, and once again, that is just not best practice. Not something we want you to do. We would rather you create a new test and copy an existing test in order to give a test that was already created and archived. If you archive it, I would say if you think you need to archive it, unarchive it. I'm sorry. If you think you need to unarchive it, and that's the only way you can do what you think you need to do, reach out to us because we want to confirm that. We want to make sure you do the steps in the right order. If you're going to do that, tell you the pros and cons to doing that. And really, if there was a better way to do it, then we would want to guide you in that as well. Okay, any other questions? Jenny, I think I'm giving it to you right now, right?
I think so, yeah. Can you go back to the presentation real quick so I can see? Well, I've got it open. I think we had student forms first on there.
Yes, archiving student forms next. Oh, wait. I picked the wrong person. I was about to make somebody else a presenter. They were going to be shocked.
We should do that in a webinar. We should totally put somebody on the spot.
Okay, I think we got Jenny.
All right, there we go. Okay, so archiving student forms. Student forms are kind of unique in that not all student forms need to be archived, but some should be archived, and some will be archived during the school year. And but the end of the year is kind of a good time to take a look at what's still open and active and what you could possibly archive. And so student forms are managed under the Forms tab. And if I go into a student form, let's just do this test scores form. These are just forms I've created in my demo site. If I go in here, I can kind of decide when you think about whether, well, that's not an active form anyway. Let me find another one. RTI initial. When you think about whether a form should be archived or not, one of the things you have to consider is it a living document? So a lot of things like 504 plans or BIPs, things like that, they are living documents, and they continue to remain active with a student for as long as that student's in the career and the form itself hasn't been changed. And so you may go in and edit items on the form, but you don't necessarily have to archive that form. Something like RTI, which can be for one student 3 weeks and for another student a whole year, or 3/4 of the year that they're under the RTI process, you may want to archive those when they're finished, or when the archive process is closed for that student, or when just at the end of the year, when all RTI for that year is done. And so again, it just kind of depends on the form itself. I can kind of talk about what it looks like on the student profile if they're archived or not. Let me find. Trenton Fudge is my cat. I knew my dog would bark as soon as, I have 3 dogs here today, so it's just going to be a miracle if nobody barked. They have been quiet as church mice until this very moment. Now they've decided to bark. So when I go into Trenton's forms, I can see that he has several active forms. This is kind of my test kiddo I use for everything. So if I archive these forms, they are going to be archived in this school year. I don't know how to minimize that where it goes to the top of my screen. They'll be archived to where it's archived in the school year where they were assigned, not the school year where they were archived. So that's kind of important to know. So anything that was assigned this year, if I archive that form, it's going to be archived in the year this year because it was assigned this year. This one that was actually assigned in 2017, if I go in this year and I archive this particular form, it's going to be archived in the 2016-17 school year. So, or actually that's a 17-18 school year form. So just kind of know that. So when someone clicked on the 17-18, they would view the forms that were archived for that year. So you can see when a form is archived, it's grayed out on a student profile. So this is a good example of what I'm talking about. We didn't see this on the 2018-19 school year, but we do see it when I click on the 2017-18 school year because it was assigned on 10/11/17 and archived on 3/20/19. So even though I archived it this year, it archived on the year it was assigned. And so I will say this, with RTI forms and things that you might have multiple forms, like in this particular case, we have an initial and then a checkup and then another checkup, and then you might even have an RTI dismissal form. It does really clean up this kind of landing page for forms on the student profile if some are archived. You can imagine over 13 years of education, if you've got a kid who's been RTI'd several times and then has, additional accommodations or designated sports like this form is, you've got one for like every year and then sometimes multiple ones for multiple subjects, how cluttered up this can get if we never archive forms. So it does, again, kind of keep it clean if we, go in and archive those forms. So to archive a form, you're going to go to pick the form. There we go. And I can see this is an active form. This is one of those that that we looked at on Trenton's profile. When I go to advanced, I can archive all active forms effective today. And that is going to archive the form for every student who has an active student form that's of this type. So that's where I do it. Again, it's just on the forms tab, I choose my form. On the advanced tab, this is where I'm going to go to archive the form. So know that if I go in and I archive all forms, nothing can be done with that form. It's not like an assessment. I can't unarchive that form. I can't make it active again for that particular student. The form itself obviously remains active and can be added to other students, but the ones that have been assigned to students cannot be reactivated once they've been archived. So just kind of
And
know that.
yeah, and we've had a couple of questions, Jimmy. Let me jump in real quick. Sorry.
Okay.
There a little more differences between active and archive forms. Essentially, when a form is active, you can still go in and change any of the answers to the questions. So, like essentially, if you think of a form just like a test, it's a series of questions. But like Jenny just said, unlike a test, you can unarchive a test. You can not unarchive a form. Essentially, what it does when you archive a form is it takes away all the options of the questions that were not chosen. So, for example, in the simplest form, let's just talk about accommodations. If we had a question like a list question in a form that said, what are the so and so accommodations for the student, and let's say there were 18 different options of accommodations, and a teacher or whoever was filling a form out had gone in and checked 3 of those 18. As long as the form is active, you can go in and change other check boxes, remove check boxes, add other. You can make changes there, and you can see all 18 choices because you have the option of making changes. If you were to print that form, when it prints, it only prints the three that you chose, because it doesn't need to print the ones that you didn't choose, because those are not the accommodations for that specific student. And so when you archive, it's essentially like printing it to PDF and then saving that PDF. It's read only. It only shows the options that were chosen, the answers that were given. It doesn't show the other options, but it's still accessible to anybody that has that student, including teachers. So I hope that cleared up a couple of the questions that came in.
Okay, is that it on the?
That's it for now. I think we'll have more, but let me look at them.
Okay. And we probably at some point need to just do a webinar. We've done one in the past, again, over student forms, and it may be something we kind of consider this summer, because all of these are kind of cool options that you can use when you're managing forms over the summer or thinking about editing forms over the summer for next year, that kind of thing. And so um, we don't have time to get into those today because we've got more topics to cover on end of year processes. But definitely your archive forms option is right here under the advanced tab. And then Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, I can archive an individual form once it's attached to a student, correct?
That's correct. Because sometimes certain forms, they may, let's say it's some kind of intervention that is going to continue into summer school,
Yeah.
maybe. And so you would not want to archive that. So you would not go to that form
Correct.
type on the advanced tab and archive all, because it would archive even the ones you didn't want it to archive.
Right.
But like Jenny's showing right now, you can always archive individual forms on the individual student. And so you can either archive all, or you can archive one at a time.
Right. So like
Unlike, unlike assessments, once again, archiving assessments, we absolutely, I mean, there's this, it's not like a where won't come on if you don't archive your tests, but in our opinion, there's no real reason to not archive tests at the end of the year. There are some real reasons to maybe not archive forms, and so forms is a good practice to archive, like Jenny had talked about cleaning up. But there definitely could be some times when archiving a form may not be the right thing to do for a certain student, because they're going to have things that continue for the next year.
Right, absolutely. If you think about like this RTI process, if Trenton was only RTI based on a unit assessment score that was particularly low, but it's uncharacteristic to him, but he got included in the RTI group because we know there's areas we need to cover over the next few weeks. And so he's brought in for some kind of intervention. Then once that process is over and we see his performance improve in the areas where he was struggling, then we would archive this form. It's no longer an active RTI process for Trenton. And so that's a case where you would archive one student's form versus, archiving everybody's. So, okay, the next thing, any more questions, or is that it on that?
We're good for now.
Okay. The next thing we had on here, clean up monitor listing groups. Y'all are going to see my demo site and go, she needs to clean up her monitor listing groups. So that's also done on the students tab. And
I bet we would look at y'all's districts and say, man, they need to clean up their monitor. I'm sorry.
Every time, just about every time. So monitor groups and monitor lists. So I just will spend a second kind of explaining the difference between the two. A monitor list is used teachers currently can't create monitor groups. They can create monitor lists, and they can create groups of students that either they do not have access to or that they have access to, but they're wanting to put them on a monitor list. It is also used by people. This is historically how it's been used. This is going to change at some point. I've been told sometime this summer that for next year it's going to be a little bit different. But for right now, it has also been used for people who do not have students rostered to them. So sometimes this is your dyslexia specialist, your ESL people that go in and they create a monitor list, and then they can see the individual student profile for the students who are on their monitor list. So here's the thing about monitor list. We always recommend that they be managed at the campus level, because somebody at central office probably does not know whether there is an educational need for an aide at the junior high to see this particular group of kids. And so we recommend that they be managed. And I would say the same thing for updating and deleting monitor lists and cleaning those up, probably should be managed at the campus. That said, if I go into my approved monitor list and I'm logged in as like a district level admin, I can see all the monitor lists for every grade level for every campus. And again, we recommend that they be managed at the campus, because I'm the principal or assistant principal or the educatorian on that campus. It's pretty quick for me to just go in and delete these. If I am the district person, I literally have to click on every campus to see these. So here's the thing about it. The thing about monitor lists is that if I had a group of first grade students and I created a monitor list and those students are now in 8th grade, if that monitor list is still active, I technically can still see those students' profiles because I still have a monitor list for them. They're still on one of my monitor lists. And so this is why it's so important for you to go in, and if you have any questions about whether a monitor list needs to be deleted or not, delete it. That's our advice. I think Jason would agree. It takes 10 minutes to create a monitor list. Probably takes longer to get it approved than actually create it, but it just takes a few minutes to get it, and then you don't have the risk of people retaining access to students that are no longer rostered to them, or that maybe were never rostered to them. And so again, best practice would be to go in and delete monitor list every year and kind of redo those. Now, at some point, and this is all part of our new development, monitor list will expire when your reporting category expires, so that they won't have that kind of access, unlimited access. At this time, as long as the monitor list is active, they can see the data for those students. So do we have any questions?
Yeah, let me kind of we several questions coming in.
Yeah.
So first, so we definitely would like to talk about some of the ideas of some of the changes, but we're not going to do that until we actually. I mean, we do. First of all, Jeannie's right. We do have many plans, and we've been talking about monitor list stuff because there are more and more co-teachers and other things out there, and monitor lists right now, you only have access to students' data on the students tab, the test and scores one at a time. I mean, this is not anything new to those of you that have been customers for a while and used Aware for a while. We've had those same opinions ourselves, and we are moving toward making some positive changes in that place. We're not going to speak specifically to any of them
Right.
today, but so question came in. Yes, we understand. The campus, we want campus people to do it, but can a district person do it? Like Jenny's logged in
As
with
a district
district
person.
asset, and you see at the top of hers right now it says delete. And so it could be if you're the district that you're in, or if your boss, the superintendent, assistant superintendent says, hey, we don't want anybody having access to students they shouldn't have. It's always the best practice, in my opinion, to send out a global email to everybody saying, okay, if you have a if somebody at your campus has a monitor list that still has an educational need to keep it, please let me know by so and so date. Otherwise, I'm going in and delete them all. That's also the same thing with tests, right? I mean, you can go in and archive them all on the mass archive. You might send a message out saying by the end of this date they're going to be all archived. If you have a reason why the test does not need to be archived, you let me know, because it could be something in summer school or whatever. And so in this case, Jenny is absolutely right. Everything she said, I agree with 100%. We don't want to play around with FERPA issues. You don't want somebody having access to students 3 years past when they really needed to have access to them. And so you definitely want to take care of this. We do recommend someone at the campus do it. But if all else fails, you do have district access, district level people that have access to go in and remove all of them. I mean, obviously not at one time. It's per time. And back on that, somebody had asked a question about approval earlier. Um, why is there any other way to approve other than just going in here and seeing which ones, like down there, their student performance on the Jenny screen there, that's got the question mark, that one needs to be approved. It's waiting for approval. Is there any other way? Long time ago, long time ago, there used to be an email that got sent to people to say that there was a monitor list needed approved. The problem is that it would get triggered and sent to anybody that had the permissions to approve it, which would be any campus level access person at that campus, and then obviously every district level person has that access. And so um, those are things we're looking at as well. But as it is right now, that is the way that you go in and see which ones need to be approved. You click on the campus, and if it's got a little purple question mark, it's waiting on approval. The green check marks, it's already been approved.
As far as monitor list goes, I've kind of said a couple of things that I probably shouldn't have about new stuff that's coming out. But I think my point in saying that is that if you're going to like clean up right now, because as things change and as the new development comes out, you just want to make sure you kind of are starting with a clean slate, because student portfolios and some other things that are releasing those, um, the need for a monitor list is going to increase, because we can create monitor lists for our kids in our portfolios that are customized by, not just our class groups. And so cleaning up monitor lists this year is it's always been an important thing, but this year would be a good time to do that. I'll just say that. So make sure you're kind of starting with a clean slate when that all rolls out. And we will definitely do a webinar over the new things to monitor lists and how they work and whatnot, once all that rolls out. And so you'll get all that information when it's ready. I've just heard bits and pieces. So I just do know that right now would be a good time to go in and clean up your
It's very exciting. I will agree.
It is. It's
And
very exciting.
I'm sure there's, and I know because there's other people hinting it on the, but yes,
Yeah.
I mean, in every aspect of Aware, we're working to get things better, and we have a team of developers now to do that, and so we're moving. Trust us.
Yeah, we're going. So it's pretty quick. If you are the person at the district who ends up cleaning monitor list up this summer, I did a couple just to show you. I mean, if you're at a giant district, like, this is not a small district by any means. It really just takes a second to click on the list. Oh, not click delete, not deny, and delete that list. Again, click the list, delete. It doesn't take long. It's a lot of clicks. It's laborsome, but again, if somebody at the campus can do it, great. If you're the person at the district who ends up getting stuck doing this, it's not, I mean, it'll take you an hour or two to get them all.
And Jenny did it by accident, but there is another option of denying.
Yes.
The denying would keep them from having to rebuild their list. So let's say the list was like 80 kids or something, and you didn't know for sure, but you didn't want them to have access. At least they would have to get reapproved by a campus principal. If you didn't want to delete it, you can just click the deny button. It keeps the list intact. They just lost access to those students. So that's another option too. But when in doubt, in my opinion, delete.
Yeah, I agree. And we'll talk a little bit later about naming conventions, but this is a great time when we talk about naming conventions. Monitor lists and monitor groups are kind of like, and assessments, of course, are like at the top of my list of having good naming conventions, because it is, again, third grade math. Who's third grade math, and like for what year, and was it one term or two, or I mean, what is the list? That title doesn't tell me anything. And so again, having a good naming convention for your monitor list will help you. It does say the requester's name right here, but this will kind of help you in the cleanup process. Um, if you have good naming conventions, makes it easier to know. I know there was like one in mine that said like 2015. Well, obviously they still have access to this kid, and they requested the list in 2015, so they probably don't need it anymore. So those kids have probably graduated. Anyway, the other big group you need to manage is the monitor groups. And so, and the big thing about monitor groups, you're not retaining, and correct me if I'm wrong about this, Jason, with a monitor group, nobody's retaining access that they shouldn't have. But when you go in to create a view, like you click the edit button and you have to select the monitor group that you want to filter the data by, which is really, really, really a useful tool. And you have to pick from like 100 groups versus like the 10 or 15 or 20 that are active in your district right now. It's just a whole lot easier. And so I know for a lot of y'all, there may be one big year of cleanup, just like archiving assessments, just like cleaning up test types, all of those things. There may be one year where this is kind of like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a big job. But then once it's done, and then if you repeat that process every year, you're going to see that it's just easier and easier to do it because you have fewer to do. And so, again, if I'm going to click on one of these, this is the campus where it was created. I can go in as the district administrator and delete that. And again, I'll talk about naming conventions. Look at some of these names. They're nice, huh? So again, naming conventions are important. They're important for cleaning up, but then also important for when you're using that monitor group for what the monitor group is intended to do, to analyze the data, summary data for that group of kids. And so again, cleaning those up will help you on that summary part on the Analyze tab for sure. Any questions about that? Or
No, I agree, and especially adding one thing on the naming convention. Um, when people make groups, they're thinking about themselves.
mm-hmm.
And so they know what the group is called. So if I called it tutoring, it makes sense to me because I'm making it. But just keep in mind, once you make that group, anybody that has access to either campus level or district level data can see that group. And
Yep.
so, especially district level staff, you want to make sure that you kind of have a naming convention plan to say at least put the campus code or the campus 3 letter abbreviation or whatever in there, because if I'm a district person and it says fourth grade whatever, I don't, especially I mean, it's one thing if we're a small district, but if you're a
My
larger
practice
district,
group. This is a
yeah,
good
I
one.
mean,
My practice group.
naming, specific naming is absolutely critical in monitor groups, and cleaning up is absolutely critical in monitor groups. Like Jenny said, this is, if you think about, and I say this in training a lot, if you think about a monitor group as a custom demographic, because that's essentially what it is. If you say ecodis or if you say Hispanic or whatever, we think about those as groups because we deal with those groups of students every day. A monitor group is just a custom one of those that we're not getting from the student management system, but it works the same way to where you can filter by that group, you can summarize by that group, you can compare, you can track. I mean, you can track performance on a particular program that we've purchased. Whatever. There's a lot of very valuable things that monitor groups can be used for, but if it's a mess, it's sure going to make it harder to do that. And so definitely, I think this is one of the biggest things that gets overlooked, and one of those things that needs to happen. But when we want to emphasize it for sure this year, to say, go in there, if you have, if nobody can tell you what that group is for, then I can promise you it's not needed. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're better off deleting them, I think. I mean, like there's a snapshot group right there from 2012, 2013. I know this is a demo site, but
Yeah.
I guarantee that there's some like that in yours as well. And so, I would say clean slates, best case scenario. If you have to keep some in there, that's understandable. But every year, if we could start with a clean slate of monitor groups, because I really can't think of many times other than if it's a multi-year kind of comparison we're going to do on a group of students, which you could do. I really can't think of that many times when a monitor group would be used for more than one school year, and so I think it's a better time just to start over every time.
Yep. I
And it
agree.
would be best. It would be best if we could get the people that create the monitor groups themselves to go in and delete them when they're through using them. But just like tests, that doesn't always happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The last thing we want to talk about as far as cleanup goes are your saved and shared views. And so saved views, these are views that you created and saved. A good example of saved views is always when you're comparing multiple assessments. You can't save those or share those as quick views. And so you may have a long list of these. And sometimes I'll log in like as a, you know, somebody who, a campus administrator, district administrator to training, and like this list goes on and on and on, and the names look like this, just like this. And I'm like, how do you even know what those are? And so at the end of the year, my save views, and again, this only affects you as a user. But if you share this information with your campus admin, I mean, chances are I'm not in 2019 or 20 or 21 going to go back and look at the learning standard breakdown with descriptions for the 5th grade math unit 10, 2016-17. I'm not going to do that. And so clean them up. When you get in there, I may use this view for something, else. I could go in and put a different test in there. So either edit it for something that is relevant right now or delete it. And so again, you can go into my save views and delete those. Or you can edit it to make it something that is,
Yeah, if you go to manage my views, there's a list of them there.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that you've created and how you've shared them. Really quick, easy way to see them and share and delete them. And then underneath that, if you're a data administrator or a district data viewer, this is the more dangerous list, to where it may not be it may be other people that created them. But you definitely want to go in and clean up the managed shared views too. Especially if it's someone that's left your district and maybe they created maybe Jason was at your district a long time ago and I created 48 views and shared with every teacher, like I might have had a habit of doing back in the day. You want to clean them up because they're probably out of date, and they're the creator of those views are no longer even with your district, so they couldn't go in and delete them if they wanted to. So this is one of those. I'm sorry, this is one of those responsibilities of being the eduphorian or the aware manager that it just really needs to take place to keep things clean.
Right. So just to clarify, on these selections, save views are things that you have saved and not shared anyway. Manage my views are things that I have saved and shared in some way. Either I've made it a personal quick view, or I have done a district quick view with all teachers can see it. Again, I can see how I've shared it. So these have been shared as quick views. And then if I click on manage shared views, again, if I'm a district data viewer or a district data administrator, I can see what everybody in the district has shared. And this is where you would want to go in and really do some cleanup, because when somebody clicks on that drop down list of quick views, if there are 500 things in that list, really if there are more than like 10 or 15, they're going to go back to those first 4. They're going to use the first 4, and they might use one that they absolutely know what it is in that list, but they are not going to muddle through all these things. It's not uncommon for us to see one in a list that's like biology benchmark fall 2013 SEs. Like it really should have probably never been a quick view in the first place that all teachers in the district can see. But at any rate, that's not an unfixable thing. This is where you fix it. You go into manage shared views. If you've got something in here that you're like, that again, like Jason said, the teacher's no longer even with the district, you can just simply click on it and hit delete and delete it. I could also edit it and make it relevant. So a side note on that, I log into sites all the time and I see all the tip and step reports from Ron at Region 10, and those are good reports. I'm not knocking the reports, but if you did those like back with the old STAR without progress measures, and you did them without the old performance levels, that they don't always pull anymore. And so you have to make sure they're updated with the current performance levels. So kind of take a look at those. If you have all the tip and steps and you've been using those in your district, if you're no longer using them, delete them, get rid of them, because they're clogging up everybody's like quick view list. If people on your campuses are still using those, that's great. Just make sure they still work. So kind of like run a quick check by clicking on those, like on a STAR assessment or on a unit assessment that has SEs assigned, and just make sure those things still pull. Because if you didn't update them after the performance levels were updated, some of them don't pull anymore. So just a quick note on that. But this is, again, a good time of year to do it. Like Jason said earlier, send out an email and say, is anybody using this? Kind of give them a deadline and then pull the trigger. Now, if you know the person's no longer in the district and it was created for an assessment in 2013, it's obvious it needs to be deleted, delete it. And this is another place where naming conventions are important. If I know what that means, then I'm more likely to say, yeah, it looks like something somebody will use. If it's something random, then I don't know what it is and if I can delete it or not. And so again, naming conventions again are always important and aware, but this is another place where they become very important. So any questions about managing? So I'm going to show you a little trick real quick. If you are uncomfortable going in and just yanking the rug out from under people, so to speak, and saying, I'm just going to delete these 10 data views because I don't think anybody's using them and they're all teacher quick views and I don't know what they are, don't delete it. Click the edit button and manage the sharing options. So go here, make it a my quick view, or just say don't make this a quick view, and hit submit. And then nobody sees it but you. I promise you, if you don't hear from anybody within like 6 to 8 weeks, nobody was using it anyway. So then you can go in and delete them. So that's kind of like a soft test for, is somebody actually using this? Do I need to keep this view in our quick views? So again,
if they get mad, just tell them that Jenny said to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Or go, oh, no, this is what I always do. I'll be like, oh, well, I'm not sure how, let me reshare it. I guess it got unshared somehow, go in and reshare it. And then it's back and nobody has to rebuild it. Nobody has to use it. Yeah. Or just blame it on Eduphoria. We'll take the hit. But yeah, I mean, that's a quick way to do it without actually, again, deleting somebody's work. It's just unshare it if you don't hear from them.
Yeah, and you can put it. You can always, if it's a teacher quick view or all teachers, you could put it in their to the my quick views, which is actually their quick views. And so if they're using it personally, they'll still have it. It just won't be in every teacher's quick view around the district. And so changing the way it's shared is a great tip.
Yep. So the my quick views, just to clarify what Jason said, that would go to whoever created it. They would be in their quick views. So that's kind of, yes, they'll still see it. They won't know that nobody else sees it.
That's right.
All right. So the last thing we've kind of talked a little bit about best practice with naming conventions. The last thing we had on our list was to talk about naming conventions, or to talk about best practices. And this is a great time of year to do that. We kind of recommend in the spring, late spring, starting these conversations. That doesn't always happen with all the testing going on, and then you have the whole end of the year hoopla, and then this is kind of where you finally slowed down enough. And a lot of times you have time with your administrators now, early in the summer, that you won't always have later in the summer. They'll be off during July, and then when they come back in August, they're frantic with getting ready for the new school year to start. And so this is and a lot of times your instructional coaches and whatnot have a little bit of time on contract, at the end of the year. It's a great time to have conversations with them. If there are things that aren't working for you in Aware, now is the time to decide you want to make a change for next year, so that when teachers come back in the fall and you do in-service, you are ready for that. Don't wait until the fall and people are already rocking and rolling to say, hey, we want to make all these changes and we want to change the way we do things, and we want to change the way you name assessments. Kind of have that plan in place now. And so now is the best time of year to start having those best practice conversations, about naming conventions, about how quick views are shared and who can do that and who can't. It's also a good time to look at your roles and rights and Aware and go, who really needs this? And, because if you take something away in the middle of the school year, they notice. If you take it away in the summer and they log back in the fall, people who didn't need that access probably won't even notice that it's gone. And if they do notice and they did need it for something, add it back. So this is a great time of year to do that. We, as the training team and also our support team, training team in particular, we love to help with best practice stuff, because really we are tasked with making sure people are using it to the best advantage for whatever your process is in your district. And so if you have questions about best practice or how would be the best way to start cleaning up test types, I've got 20 test types and you really only need 3. how do we clean those up? What's the best way to do that? This is the time of year to do that. We can walk you through the process for that, or make recommendations that we know other districts or have worked for other districts at this time. Jason, do you want to weigh in on best practices or?
No, I mean, we don't. I'll just say that we don't have all the answers, but we've been doing this a long time, and we obviously have all of you guys that we have talked to through the years. I mean, there's many of you on this webinar that we've known each other, all of us, for years, and so we get ideas, and sometimes we don't even know that a district's doing this, and then we talk to them and find out, and we're like, man, that's a good idea. You're doing that, and then we can share that with other folks. And so, if you get into those conversations like Jenny was alluding to, and you're not sure if you should do this or not, if is this a good idea, what are the pros and cons, absolutely, just look out, reach out to us, and we'll be glad to at least have a conversation with you. We can say, what we do know the impacts. We can also give you ideas a lot of times on what we've seen out there. That's a different option than what you may be doing. And so please reach out to us. That's what we're for, like Jenny said.
Absolutely. So, yeah, training at eduforia.net, or support at eduforia.net. If you have questions specific to the clicking of the software, support can help you with those, but best practices definitely will come to training. So, any more questions? Or
I think we're
we
good. I think we're good. We did pretty good. We're not even. We're almost exactly an hour. That rarely
okay,
happens.
7. Do I need to
So,
like rattle on for another 3 minutes? Do that.
no, I think we're all right. But we did good, and good questions, guys. And if you ask a question, and we I think we tried to at least talk about all of them, or at least answer them via the responding to a text question there. If we didn't get your question asked, or if you have any follow-ups or whatever, once again, reach out to support@eduforia.net or training@eduforia.net. And most of all, enjoy the summer.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll talk to you guys again soon. Thanks.